Now, a teenager with the power inside and out. Just seeing what he's accomplished might change you. Bob Brown has Kyle's story.
His presence as a wrestler could electrify a high school arena.
Go, Kyle!
I didn't have to wrestle to my opponents. I had to wrestle myself.
Pull him in, Kyle!
I had to wrestle the challenges, that I faced before I ever stepped out there.
He was for real. Nobody took him lightly. If they did, they regretted it.
Even though he isn't out of his teens, stories about Kyle Maynard are rooted like legends at his former North Georgia high school, Collins Hill.
If I have a practice going on and I think I've got some kids who aren't being as tough maybe as they should be, I'll stop practice and I'll remind them about a guy that wrestled here with no arms and no legs and never complained, even when he hurt his shoulder once. And he basically only had 3 joints to wrestle with, 2 shoulders and a neck.
Kyle was born a congenital amputee, a condition which has no known cause and may affect fingers or a limb, but rarely affects all 4 limbs as it did with Kyle.
All we knew is that he was a beautiful baby. He was glowing. He was gorgeous. He came out with the prettiest skin, so we focused on that gorgeous face.
How he became a winning high school wrestler, good enough to compete in his state championships, is a story he tells himself in a book published this month titled No Excuses. From the beginning, he says, his father insisted that he learn to feed himself out of concern that he might grow too dependent on others, while his grandmother refused to let other people look away from him.
She brought me to a lot of grocery stores, things like that, and she'd set me down in the cart, and she told me, she said, you don't have to be afraid of people. Look them straight in the eye and let them know that you see yourself as normal, and that's the way that they should perceive you too.
Okay, here we go.
Kyle's father may have been the one who encouraged him to play rough and tumble games, such as street hockey, but it was his mother who made the call to the coach when, in 6th grade, Kyle decided he wanted to play football. She thought just being around the team would help him socialize.
Stick up for one another.
Kyle and his father believed he could play. So did the coach. And Kyle Maynard became a nose tackle.
He was really good at clogging up the middle of the line. And so, he didn't have a lot of mobility, like a lot of linemen might have, but he would just get in there and plug up the hole,
People had to trip over him.
Which was, they'd trip over him to get around him.
But during that same period, his father was encouraging him to try another sport, which would at least match him with kids his own weight, wrestling. Kyle started in 6th grade and lost his first 35 matches.
I was extremely discouraged. I don't think that anybody could go through, that period without doubting themselves in some way if you're a true competitor. I wanted to win.
This footage from Kyle's high school career shows one of the ways his opponents learned to take advantage of him. They kept a hand on his head to prevent him from reaching them.
And they try to spin around behind. And by doing that, I obviously don't have that reach to get out there and grab hold of the leg quite as easily.
They would stay away. They would push off and just stay away. So, no, we got in there and yelled.
Go! Kyle! 1367. Get after him now!
Kyle and his father, a former wrestler, worked out an extensive weight training program for him. To this day, because of the strength he built, he has never been pinned. Collins Hill High School coach Cliff Ramos helped Kyle invent his own unique moves, including one called the rope-a-dope.
He would just kind of lay there on his back, and pretty soon they would come after him, and then he would spring into action.
Keep moving your head, Kyle!
Ramos became a mentor to Kyle, and Kyle paid him back by learning to win, with 35 victories on the varsity squad in his senior year.
If you lose, it's all on you. And wrestling is, it's a brutal sport in that way, but then, the victories are so much sweeter too. And because of that, I learned so much about myself. If you can persevere through that, then, anything is truly possible. And I believe that, deep down in my heart.
And there was times I'd look at him towards the end of his time here, and I'd have to turn around so my team wouldn't see me with tears in my eyes.
At wrestling dinners, where Kyle's success had made him famous, Ramos also revealed other sides of his prize pupil.
He went on a church trip a few years ago to the beach. He got his buddies to put ketchup all over the ends of his arms. They laid him near the water, and they ran away, and they started screaming, "Shark, shark!"
Kyle travels in a wheelchair. He rejected using prosthetic devices, in part, he says, because without them as a child, he was able to play so freely with his sister Amber, the oldest of 3 sisters and his best friend. In Ireland, where Kyle was invited to speak, the family came across the estate of an adventurer named Arthur Kavanagh, a congenital amputee like Kyle, who in the 19th century became an expert horseman, traveled the world, went tiger hunting in India, and left behind 6 children. You say in the book, I wouldn't want my children to face the same adversity. Why not?
It's scary, I'm told that, if I have children that they'd be completely normal, but, I'd be scared to, have the children, not for the children necessarily, but for, maybe for me. Maybe it's my own insecurity in the fact that, I'd want to provide the best life possible for my kids.
One of his crowning achievements came when he qualified in his senior year for the Georgia State High School Wrestling Championships. Competing against the best, he won 3 of his matches. He was wrestling with a broken nose, and his final opponent sometimes used moves against it that caused excruciating pain. By the 3rd period, additional damage to his nose was causing blood to run down his throat. A final attempt to gain a pin failed, and the end of the match was also the end of his high school career. Coach Ramos was the first to reach Kyle after the loss.
People just stopped and applauded, and it went on, and I just kind of reacted, and I went out there and I wanted to pick him up and put him on my shoulders, but I'm not getting any younger. It was a pretty emotional time for me.
Kyle, who now drives back and forth between home and the University of Georgia, where he's a student, has a lot of ambition. He'd like to coach. He'd like to work as a broadcast commentator. He's now entering jiu-jitsu tournaments and is booked for speaking engagements. But if you ask him or his parents, they will say their goal has simply been to lead a normal life. But is there really a good definition for that word, for normal, what normal is?
Just to lead that normal life, to me, means just to go about things day to day as if they don't matter, as if the obstacles I face aren't there. Leading a normal life doesn't mean living a stagnant life. You're going to look ahead and you're going to set near impossible goals that other people would say you can't achieve, and you can go out and do it.